Hello everyone, my name is Manon. I am a PhD student at the University of Birmingham, where I work at Bifoface, so you probably have heard of it. It looks like that. So I was asked today to give a lecture about my research, the context of it, why it's important, and especially what I've been finding. So my research at Bifoface is on the nitrogen in forest soil and the elevated CO2 response of a key soil nutrient to global change. So this title probably doesn't mean anything to you right now, or you don't really get why it's important. But hopefully by the end of this short talk, you can understand what it means, that it's not that complicated, and that is actually quite important to know to understand how will be our world in the future. So that's what my PhD is really about, and that's what a lot of people in the Bifoface are doing, is studying climate change and trying to predict what will happen in the future. So just quickly, you probably have heard about it already, but climate change, it depends on the greenhouse gas emission that we humans are emitting. So we have three main greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. That is carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. But carbon dioxide is by far the most important one and the one that is the most concentrated. And those gases, basically, when they accumulate in the atmosphere, because we are emitting them a lot, what they do is that they prevent the sun radiation to be reflected back. So the sun radiation basically stays stuck between the ozone layer and Earth, and it causes warming. So it's really dependent of the more of this gas we have in the air, the more we will have global warming. So that's a really short description of it. Carbon dioxide, as I say, is the most important one, and we are emitting it a lot. But there is a really magic machine that is called a tree that is sucking up the carbon dioxide out of the air. So trees and any plants can do that by photosynthesis. So they take this carbon dioxide out from the air and make sugar from it. So forests are really good at doing it. They do also release carbon dioxide for respiration of both trees and microbes, but in a forest, most of the time the balance is positive, so they take more carbon dioxide than they release. And when this happens, we call forest a sink for carbon, and mean that they can help us mitigate our carbon emissions, so they can help us with global change. So when this happens, it's good. Now, what we're wondering is that will this machinery still be working a lot if we keep increasing our carbon emission? Because that's what we've been doing. So what will happen if we put even more CO2 in the atmosphere? Probably that the more carbon dioxide we put, the more trees will take it and transform it into sugar. So if this happens, it's also good because it can really help us really reduce the carbon dioxide in the air. So if we basically right now, forest, we estimate that it take 1/3 of our emission. But if we emit more, maybe they will still take 1/3 of it, so it will still be, well, pretty good for us. But the question is, will it really do that? Can this magic machine be like working more and at a faster rate to really take everything we are emitting? That's the big question behind Bifoface, actually. And we are not sure about that, basically because trees don't only need this carbon dioxide to grow, they also need other nutrients, other resources. The three main other resources they need are water, so water that just will depend on the rainfall, which actually might change with climate change, but that is not my field. And also two other nutrients that can really impact this tree growth is nitrogen and phosphorus. So they are both nutrients that tree take from the soil, but they can be at really low concentrations, so they can be very limiting for tree growth. So basically what we think is if one of these three resources is limiting in the soil, then it will stop the fast tree growth and it will stop tree to suck up all our carbon emission. So how would we know? How can we predict if this resource can be limiting in the future? Well, it's complicated. We need to see in the future. And it's especially complicated when it comes to nitrogen, or at least I would say that because it's what I am looking for. So I'm gonna just talk about the nitrogen one. Basically, nitrogen is pretty tricky because there is a whole cycle of nitrogen. So we have nitrogen everywhere so it's one of the most important atoms. It's 80% of our atmosphere. It's also 3% of our body is nitrogen, but tree can still struggle, and plant in general can struggle to obtain the nitrogen they need because they only assimilate nitrogen in specific form in the soil. That's why we fertilize to have crops. We fertilize them with nitrogen. We add nitrogen to help them grow, but we don't do that in forest. So we need just to rely on natural processes. So yeah, they can only take two different forms of nitrogen, which are the ammonium one and the nitrate one. So those two forms, they are present in the soil, but they're sometimes at very low concentration. So what make these two forms of nitrogen is actually the decomposition. So in scientific term, we call that mineralization, but what it is really is just dead things, dead leaves, dead bark, dead anything that decompose. And during this decomposition, we release ammonium and nitrate. And those one can then be taken up by tree, and tree can grow happily. So that is good, but the issue is that once the dead organic matter is transformed into nitrate, so the nitrate usually don't stay for a very long time in the soil because it just doesn't stay long. It either goes down in the groundwater where it actually causes pollution, or it goes up in the atmosphere and it gets transformed into nitrous oxide, which I say from at the beginning was a greenhouse gas. So this is not what we want. And it's a cycle basically. So then it gets transformed into nitrous oxide, that gets transformed into N2, which is our atmosphere, and come back. So everything is a cycle, everything is about balance. If the cycle works well, we should get enough available nitrogen be released from the dead organic matter, and this nitrogen should get taken up by the tree before disappearing back in the water or in the atmosphere. That will be the more efficient way for forests to take the nitrogen and recycle it. But it's not always what's happening, and it's actually not really what's happening. So we need to study it. We need to understand to understand if nitrogen will be limiting in the future, we need to measure each of these processes to understand what will happen if this will be fast, this will be slow, this will be fast, this will be slow. We're not sure right now. So we're trying to put a number behind all these different arrows. How we do that? It's actually the principle is pretty easy. To do it's not that easy, but the principle of it is pretty easy. We do that using different forms of nitrogen. So nitrogen can exist into two forms. It can be light or it can be heavy. But in our environment, basically we have only the light one. So everywhere in every pool, in the atmosphere, in the soil, we find the light one. The heavy one is very rare. But if we synthesize it in the lab, so we just produce it, and we artificially add it somewhere. So let's say we replace the dead organic matter, nitrogen, from the light one to the heavy one. What will happen? What will happen is that if we wait for a few hours, for a few days, its heavy nitrogen will be found everywhere else. And that's how we measure it. That's how we measure rates. We then look at everywhere else how much heavy nitrogen we found, and we can estimate these different processes, and we can understand which of this error is the fastest, basically. So we've been doing that. Where we've been doing it, we've been doing that in facilities that simulate the atmosphere of tomorrow. So there are 2 facilities in the world that do that for now. It's Biforeface in the UK and Nukeface in Australia. So they are both very similar, other side of the world, but very similar. The principle is that some part of the forest will be basically encircled and will live under an atmosphere, a future atmosphere, so with higher carbon dioxide, so higher concentration in carbon dioxide. And some part just live normally, like under normal atmosphere. So yeah, we've been working there after a lot of field work, even more days of lab work, of processing samples, a lot of analysis that some worked, some didn't. We've been able to find some interesting things and we've been able to understand kind of the mechanism and what's really happening. So I wanted to summarize a bit what we've been finding in just a schematic. It's not only what I've been finding, to be honest, it's also what other research in the world have been finding, and that's what I'm gonna show is the most plausible explanation that we have for now. So when it comes to what we understand for now, is that when we had elevated carbon dioxide first of all, I should say, in a system that is not nutrient limited, where a tree is happily growing, having everything they need. If in this kind of system, where we had carbon dioxide, elevated CO2 we call it, so atmosphere of the future, the trees are gonna take this extra carbon dioxide, so through like this photosynthesis. So they're gonna make more sugar of this extra carbon dioxide, and they're gonna let the microbes know about it. So, and to communicate with the microbes, they release sugar from the roots, sugar and other stuff, but mostly sugar. So they're gonna release more sugar, or maybe different kind of sugar, to communicate this with microbes. In this case, the way they are gonna stimulate the microbes, so they're gonna make the microbes basically work more and grow more as well. So the microbial pool is also gonna be enhanced. And what the microbes are gonna do about it is that they're gonna enhance the decomposition of dead organic matter. So they're going to transform more of this dead organic matter into ammonium. So more ammonium will be produced, or ammonium will be produced faster, basically. And this is good, because then the tree is going to take more of this ammonium, because it needs more, because it's growing faster. So we have a very linked, like a little cycle happening here. And what we've been fighting is that then, consequently, less of this ammonium is getting converted into nitrate, and so less is lost in the water and less is lost in the air, which is good, which is very positive for future scenario if this happens. I mean that nitrogen might not be an issue in the future, maybe something else will be. Maybe water will be. As I was saying, nitrogen is not the only one that can prevent and stop tree growth, but it's one of the main ones. So this is good. Now, we've been also seeing different things in different situations. So what we think is that actually when nutrients are limiting from the start, so if from the start a tree doesn't have really enough nitrogen and phosphorus to grow, if we had more carbon dioxide, it's not really going to be able to take it, and it's not really going to be able to communicate this to the microbes, so it's not going to be able to release the sugar. And so basically nothing will happen. So there's not going to be a stimulation of microbial activity, and not really going to be a stimulation of the whole nitrogen cycle and the taking up of the ammonium. So, and that's an important finding, because in a lot of places in the world, soil is nutrient is limiting in the soil, so we cannot forget about this scenario. So yeah, it's basically the answer of our main question. How far is going to be limited by nitrogen under future climates? The response is it depends. It depends on which environment, which soil, which country. So yeah, everything else. So the conclusion, the conclusion of my research for now is that yes, forests can help us mitigate climate change, so can help us reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but they also have their own boundaries and limitations, so they can't take more and more of our carbon emission. On this positive note, thank you very, very much for listening to me. I hope you understood and that it was interesting for you. So yeah, that's also all the name of my supervisors who've been contributing to this research. Thanks for listening again. Bye.